and ready to go. 103.0. If you could go back...
Does that have anything to do with...
And what if that was your last chance?
Seeing how things turned out, would you now change...
Was that your decision?
I can't imagine what that would feel like.
We want to know.
We want to know.
We want to know.
We want to know.
We want to know. People say that within every person there is a whole galaxy.
We want to know.
Are people right?
From the creators of American in Yerevan, Ina M.K.
and Stephen Oxner.
Homesick.
At home.
Have you ever felt that way?
City. Coming home again.
Good evening, Yerevan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
We are here in the studio at Radio Von with a very special Stephen. And I don't really know even how to say your last name now.
Either Donatelle,
Donatelle, or Donatelli.
Donatel. Or
Donatel.
Donatelle, or I mean, there's a story.
There's a
there
story.
you go.
Should we start there?
We should,
let's start with that.
With the story about your last name, because it's an Italian last name.
It's an Italian last name, yeah. My grandfather on my father's side was, like all of my grandparents, was born in the U.S. His parents were from a small town in central Italy called Ataleta. And I've actually been there. And we thought it was really neat when we got there to, start asking people, is there anybody here named Donatelli? And it was so funny because like a third of the town or half the town all shared our last name. It was crazy, but it was a small town. It's like 2,000.
Hey, that's my cousin. That's my cousin. Oh, that's
like 2,000 people or something like that. But yeah, so it was my great grandparents that went to the U.S. from Italy, and they finally settled in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, and that's where my grandfather was born. And at that time, there were 3 Donatelli families living in Minneapolis, and they all spelled their last name the Italian way with an I at the end, so it was Donatelli. And one of them was my grandfather's family, and he had 6 sisters who all ended up getting married and changed their last names, of course. And then there was another one, and that family was in the restaurant business, and I think there was Tony Donatelli was the only son. He had some sisters. I don't know exactly what the deal with that was, but they, of course, all got married and changed their last names. And then there was the other Donatelli family who had like 3 or 4 sons.
Wow.
And
finally,
they had connections to the mafia, to organized crime.
Classic.
Maybe even to like Al Capone in Chicago
is this
or
Don
whatever.
Atelli?
Maybe.
Don Atelli.
Don Donatelli.
I mean, it could. Who knows?
Don Donatelli or just Don?
Maybe all those stories that my grandfather told me were like made up just to hide the fact that he was hiding from the FBI or something. I have no idea. So he decided to stop pronouncing the I at the end because the police would always give him a hard time. Like, oh, who are you? Oh, Leo Donatelli. Like, oh, so you're one of them. So let's bring you into the station and interrogate you and see if we can make you slip up and tell us anything. So he got sick of that, and so he changed the spelling to LLE, but he still pronounced it Donatelli. And the police kept on giving him trouble. So then he decided finally just to make the E silent and not bother with the paperwork to change the spelling again. So it just became Donatel. So I guess for me it kind of depends on a little bit who's asking, because here I have some documents in Armenia that it's spelled just LL with nothing.
Oh, God.
Because I said Donatel. And they didn't, And then my sisters, trying to go back to the Italian roots, were pronouncing it Donatelli again. And
it's all so complicated.
So
just like in Italian movies about the mafia.
Well, and so you have this Italian last name, but as far as I understand, you have an American passport, right?
Oh yeah, I mean on all sides, my grandparents, all 4 of my grandparents, were actually born in the U.S.
Yeah.
On my mom's side, all 4 of my great-grandparents were born in Europe. They were all Dutch.
Okay.
On my father's side, my grandmother's parents were from Poland, and my grandfather's parents were from Italy.
Wait.
So-
But if
So
you,
I am.
so
I really am an American. I'm
an
a
American.
I'm a mutt.
And so wait, but just a second. So you haven't? Are you a tourist?
Are you
tourist?
here for
No,
a
I've been-
conference?
Are you here on a conference?
Are
Not
you-
if I am, I missed it and
Are-
overstayed my visa.
Wait a second.
Oh, you're in Peace
You must
Corps.
be in the Peace Corps.
No.
You're not in the Peace Corps?
No, I
This is
am
free.
Wait,
here.
hold on.
I've
Are you a spy?
You're a
You're here. You're spying.
okay.
Is that
We're
what's
gonna
going
have
on?
to cut this short right now. The Marines are coming in. You guys got me in trouble.
Middle.
Mira, Ana.
Yeah.
What
so
are you doing here?
I've been here. I came to Armenia for the first time in 2001.
Oh, here comes the story.
Yeah, I was chasing someone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not sure if she was running away from me or not, or if she actually wanted me to come.
Uh-oh, it's she.
Okay, it's a she you're chasing.
No, I was on a crazy road trip with a friend of mine in 2000, and we stopped and spent a few nights in Las Vegas, and I met this girl, and we hit it off really well. We became friends, and then we started dating, and then we got engaged, and then she finished her master's degree and came back to Armenia and couldn't get her visa renewed because she had a 2-year homestay requirement. So I came here.
You came home.
Yeah.
You came home.
You came home. Did you? Didn't you?
Wait a second. This is interesting. And so you were here in 2001, and have you been here since 2001?
I was working on my master's degree as well when I met my wife,
Uh-oh.
and I dropped out of school to come here.
Ah!
So I dropped out in January of 2001 and came here in February, and then we were here until 2003 when her homestay requirement was finished, and she applied for a green card, and then I also applied for graduate school. And I got accepted to graduate school in New York, so we moved back to the States for 3 years, and I did my master's degree, finished it finally.
Okay.
And then after that, the first real job offer, or first real job offer I got was back here in Armenia.
Oh.
I was lucky,
Armenia
just
is
kind of
good to you.
Yeah, pretty good. I was bumbling around here because I came without really having any job prospects or anything like that, and was just kind of bumbling around and got connected with the International High School here, which is now located out by Vahagni, QSI. And so I was working for them from 2001 until I left in 2003. And I sent them my resume again after I finished my master's degree, and they said, "Oh yeah,
come on back.
we'll have you back."
Wow.
Yeah.
And that is from now, that's 2006.
That was 2006, and I was with them on and off for several years.
Okay.
And now I'm working at ATC, the Agribusiness Teaching Center, teaching business writing and intermediate English.
Stephen, you should
Wow.
understand each other
We
well.
should talk- we'll talk a bit.
I'm sitting
We'll
between
talk-
these two teacher Steves, and right now I need to make a wish right on air. I promised
Here
you
we
guys.
go. Ina's going to make her wish.
Ta-da.
We're going to talk more about your vocation, not your work. We're not going to be talking about work here this evening.
Yeah,
at
no
all.
work.
Okay.
When we come back, we're going to have a
Screw
short
work.
break here. Don't go away. You're listening to Ina MK
And Stephen Oxner
on
and
a new
our
program.
and our guest Stephen Donatelli.
On this new program called Homesick at Home. Don't go away.
Have you ever felt that way?
Every Friday night
With someone new. Homesick.
at home. Well, and here we are, back at home. Ina, right?
Oh yeah. The music is so nice.
Every time we start, we have this new music for this new program that we have, and it
It's
feels
kind of
like
a new mood.
you have to kind of talk with a smoky voice as soon as you come on
Lean
the air.
back,
You lean
kind of
back
like
and you-
with a drink. Where's the drink? Okay.
Where's the drink? Can someone bring the drinks in
I
here?
could find something, I'm sure.
We were talking about your path of getting here, which started. This is also a very similar thing that you and I have in common. It started with love, maybe, if we can use that L word.
A love route.
And then continued
I married
on.
her.
You married her. Well, I think we have to say it then.
And I'm still married to her.
Amazing. Yeah. And what I would like to ask you about first is your vocation and how a vocation. You wrote to us to give us some context about this interview. That it's a very different thing from someone's work when it's a vocation, such as when a nun decides to go into the church, into the monastery, and they take on aspects of a lifestyle to put into themselves, I would suppose, and create a whole living stream of psychology.
And I think, I mean, for me, it was something that I did just kind of fall into teaching.
Oh, you fell into it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I did my bachelor's degree in philosophy with minors in political science and theology.
Okay.
And I got started with the philosophy thinking it would be a good path to law school. And then I spent a semester studying in Rome and loved the art and the literature and everything. And I was like, law school?
Okay.
Law school?
Whatever. That's too... But I really didn't know what, you know, it was... I didn't know where exactly that was going. But of course, with philosophy, what do you end up doing? You know, you end up teaching.
You end up being a philosopher throughout life.
Well, and that may be a vocation. That is certainly not work. That's not a job. you don't get paid for that. Very few people
I wish.
do. Yeah, I know. I do too. But it was, so I just found myself doing little teaching activity, tutoring stuff when I was still in college. People would come and ask me to help them with studying different things like that. And then I ended up here. And of course, being an American here, people wanted to learn English. And so I started doing that. And then at the International High School, I was teaching literature and history and geography. And it just kind of, it worked. You know, there was a while there, after I got back here from New York after finishing my master's degree, where I thought maybe I'd try to do something else, get into business or whatever. But I am a very curious person. You know, the internet was a crazy, incredible thing for me because I look stuff up all the time and I go down rabbit holes. You know, I'm one of those people where we'll be sitting around talking about something. I'm like, I should know the answer to that. Somebody should know the answer. Let's look. You know, and then you
Just
find
Google.
and you start reading an article, and then you click on a link, and the next thing you know, you're reading about something else, and you're reading about something else, and you're going and going.
So you end up reading all the time.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't read nearly as much as I would like to anymore. But yeah, I mean, just try absorbing things because I'm curious and I like to know the answers to questions. And I like to be able to give people answers when they ask questions. And so when you accumulate knowledge, then you just kind of share it. Or at least for me, I just do, even if I'm wrong. It's just like, hey,
share the information that you
somebody
have.
asked me a question. I think I've got an answer for that, and I'll tell them and just kind of say, well, this is
my opinion.
kind of where I know it from, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right.
And teaching is also like you always have space to learn more and more and more. So it's not like, okay, you reached here and this is the limit.
Yeah.
So it always makes it interesting to develop all the time.
It can. Oh, it can get boring. It can get really boring sometimes if you're doing the same thing over and over again. But if you're really paying attention to to your students. You know, teachers are not entertainers. But there is a sort of relationship between a teacher and the students that is similar to the relationship between an entertainer and an audience. You have to know your audience. You have to pay attention to your audience. You have to interact with them somehow. So I think if as a teacher, whether you're in a classroom in front of a group of students, or you're doing something one-on-one, or if you're just somebody who's talking with someone and they want to learn from you, from your knowledge, your experience, whatever, you need to approach them where they are, you know, and so you find different angles, different ways to attack the same issue, different stories to tell, to explain it in a way that they're more likely to get it and understand it. And in that sense, yeah, I mean, you always need to be kind of learning more and more so that you can try to explain it in more different ways, so that you can always try to kind of hit your audience in a way that they can get and react to.
Do you think you need to be a little somewhat like a psychologist to work with your audience, or no? Just
I don't know. I mean, psychologist meaning
to
psychologist,
find. I mean, to find a certain contact with your audience.
Yeah, but I don't know if I would call that psychology. I mean, that's just kind of being aware and alert, being kind of in the moment and watching people and trying to understand them and where they're coming from and what's going on. I mean, it's funny. Psychology. I picked up a book of psychology like a few weeks ago, and I've been reading some articles, and a lot of it just seems to be like, yeah, duh.
Yeah, sure.
You know, they're citing all of these studies and all of this research that they did that backs up these theories, and I'm thinking, you can just sit around and watch people in cafes and, you know, observe a lot of this stuff. And in fact, a lot of it's not new. A lot of it, philosophers and whatnot have spoken about in the past, just human behavior kind of stuff. So to say it's psychology, I don't know. It's just kind of trying to be observant.
Yeah.
I would like to give our listeners an opportunity to read more of your thoughts. If they would like to go, they can go to your blog, zophorian.blogspot.am to learn more from you if they have any kind of interest in what we're talking about here. That's again Zophorian, ZOPHORIN at .blogspot.am. We're gonna go for a quick break here, and we'll be right back talking more with Stephen Donatelli on Radio Van. Homesick at Home.
Let's see how many different ways we can pronounce my last name.
Here we are back here in the studio listening to your favorites tonight. That was Baby I'm Gonna Leave You by Led Zeppelin.
That's cool. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Here I am sitting in the studio between two Stevens who are forever homesick.
Did you make your wish? Yeah.
It's in process.
It's in the process.
It's a long one.
Will you tell us about your wish when you've made it? Or is that
No.
like not? You're not allowed to.
No,
It's like
I'm
birthday
sorry.
wishes.
It won't come true then.
Yeah, it won't
I know
come
it. I know it. I
true,
just had
right.
to make sure, you know.
And especially in Armenia, this is such an odd thing. Two
Yeah, I know.
Stevens.
Two Stevens,
It
yeah.
might actually come true. So be serious about it.
Yeah, I
Don't-
have to.
Give it some
Yeah.
thought.
This is a
Right.
serious approach, so
Right.
I'm writing an essay in my head. Okay, and let's.
You can
get
give it to
back.
us. We'll check it for you.
Okay.
Oh,
essay.
yeah.
ABC check. Thank you. I'm lucky tonight. Okay, so Stephen, you have 3 kids,
Yes.
right? And are they Armenian kids?
It depends on who asks them.
Do they identify with like Armenian.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, they were, two of them were born here. All three of them have been raised here. They're, the older two are fluent in Armenian. They went to local
cool.
schools. Have local friends, all of that. The third one still kind of speaks her own language. She's
too early.
I mean, English and some Armenian, and then we let her get away with a lot of words that aren't words, but we know what they mean.
Yeah.
You know how that is with little kids.
Do you have any examples that you can tell us about? For example, my daughter, I'll let you think about it. My daughter has started speaking in the past month, and she calls titik geek. Geek. Which is it's a very common theme when you're a year and 5 months old.
Yeah.
Geek happens
True.
all the time.
Oh yeah, God, now I'm on the spot and I can't really think of anything. But it is cute how she mixes the English and the Armenian sometimes. Like Hatsik now.
Right now.
Yeah. Eli
awesome.
fun.
Any fun?
Yeah, more fun.
That's great.
Stuff like that. Yeah. No, I can't think of any of her. I can't really think.
It's tricky when
you're put on the spot.
Sorry about that.
Plus, I probably wouldn't be able to pronounce them correctly anyway.
And speaking of raising kids, have you ever had any arguments with your wife regarding raising them in American way, Armenia? I mean all these layers of clothes that Armenians
Do you have any
are used to.
We never fight. In reality, no. Of course we do. Of course we fight about how we're going to raise the kids.
Did you find this one concept of doing that?
No. It's always we. From my perspective, it's like we think about things, we might, disagree, argue about it, and then in the end, I think it just kind of happens, and so far it's always pretty much worked out. And so, or maybe maybe my wife's behind the scenes pulling the strings, and it always, she's always, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult. They've got two cultures that are very influential on them. One that they live in, and then the other one that is kind of always around. The American English language stuff. It's always there. And then we're living in Armenia, and they're going to an Armenian school. And they are blonde-haired kids, and so they do kind of stick out. And so there's a term, I know it from teaching at the International High School, the third culture kids, where the parent is from one parent is from one culture and another parent is from another culture, or maybe both the parents are from the same culture, but they're living in a second culture. And so they're called third culture kids because the kids kind of develop their own third culture.
Yeah.
And
it's not so much Armenian, not so much American, but
it's a mix. It's a mix of
fusion.
both.
Yeah.
It's a fusion, and I would like to think that it's the best of both.
Huh? Why do you think that?
Because I think my kids rock.
Yeah, classic dad.
Come on,
Mixtures of cultures and nationalities.
My son
so
plays
cute.
trumpet and guitar and listens to Frank Sinatra and Led Zeppelin and Metallica. And
That's a kid you can be proud of.
that's awesome. And my
Nice
daughter,
taste.
my daughter is into literature and stuff like that. So she's reading great books. So yeah.
So by the way, what kind of
and
books
she's
does she read?
she's writing too.
Oh, that's genes, strong
I don't
genes.
see
I
it.
see here. Yeah, right.
Well, I
Music?
don't know. I mean, influence. They have talent in stuff that I love. Places where I don't have talent. And my wife too. I mean, my wife and I both love music and love literature. and they picked that up from us. I probably at such an early age that they actually, if they weren't born with the talent, they got
They
exposed to
wouldn't-
the love of that stuff so early that they, got talent from a very young age. That's awesome. But my daughter is reading all sorts of things. There was one book that one of my favorite writers is Jack Kerouac, and he, I ran into him when I was in high school, and have been reading him kind of on and off and rereading him here and there ever since. And my daughter, she knew this, and she's heard me talk about him, and she said, well, can I read some Jack Kerouac? She's still in high school. So I gave her a book that I used to teach at the International High School, a Kerouac book, which is from when Kerouac is younger, very innocent, simple book. And she read it, and she thought it was really good. And she said, okay, can I read his classic, can I read his classic book
Does she read
on
in
the
English?
road? Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on what it's written in. If it's written in English, then she'll read it in English.
Oh, that's
If
cool.
it has
Read
to
the
be-
original version.
If it has to be translated, then look for the best translation.
By the way, do you speak Armenian?
No comment.
Oh no! Plead the fifth.
Yeah.
Come on, say something. You have to
What's
say
your
something.
favorite phrase?
What's your favorite phrase?
Come on,
or
come on.
word?
You should
You have
have
a
it.
favorite word?
Mirope?
Ah,
Mirope. It's a comma. Mirope.
that's a comma.
But yeah, so my daughter wanted to read On the Road, and I said, no, you're not.
Wait
you're
a
not
second,
old
wait a
enough yet,"
second.
because
On the road.
it's a little crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's a crazy
You don't
crazy
know.
book. Well, she snuck out to the bookstore and bought it, and got most of the way through it before I found her
noticed
copy.
it.
Before I noticed, we were traveling this summer and going places, and so I didn't notice right away.
So you were on the road while she was reading on the road.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So that's But she's she read 1984 and Animal Farm and all sorts of stuff. I mean, she's stealing books from my shelf, left and right. It's great, but I'll probably never get them back.
Well, you still have 42 minutes to learn more about the internal life of living as an American in Yerevan. Not from me,
Yeah, finally.
finally.
Just from another Steven.
Yeah.
Here from the other Steven, if you can believe it, here on Radio Von, you're listening to Homesick at Home.
With Steven Oxner.
And Ina MKKK.
Radio One.
A special request from Stephen Donatelli, Subterranean Homesick Alien, which fits this program
Yeah,
quite well. Thank
totally.
you for that choice.
Yeah.
By Radiohead.
We could have used that as our background music.
Oh yeah,
Maybe
but Nina
next
Simone
time.
is fine.
Yeah, she is.
Oh,
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of relaxing, you know.
I have a question for you, Stephen.
We have a bunch
Another
of
one?
questions.
Here's a
We
question
have
for
a
you.
bunch of questions. Steven.
No, but I get to
it
ask you
doesn't
guys
really-
questions.
Wait, hold on. Hold on.
Do you have a question?
No. I've been doing that during the breaks.
Oh yeah. Okay, so here's the question.
Are you
If
enjoying
you-
our show?
Are you enjoying the show?
Yeah, but there's this one guy who keeps talking too much. That would be me.
Steven's pointing at himself right
Oh
now.
no, come on. Okay, sorry, Steven.
Okay,
Sorry.
here's my question. If you had to get paper cuts between all of your fingers and toes or on one of your eyeballs, which would you do? Which would you have? Which would you choose?
That's a really intellectual
So
question.
this is when we're getting really serious.
What time of year is it?
Oh, good question. December.
December. Okay.
Wow. He's really picturing it.
Pinky on my right hand.
No,
No.
all between all of
All-
your fingers and
oh.
toes
Oh,
or
wait.
on your eyeball.
Between all of my fingers and well, wait a second. No, not on my eyeball. No. I suppose between all my fingers and toes,
And
or between
toes.
all of my fingers or all of my toes.
No,
And
it's
No, you have two choices. One of them is between all of your fingers and toes? I know this is not the most ordinary question. The other one is
I can make
You can do it, Steven.
or your eyeballs.
split this
Just
into
one eyeball, not both eyeballs.
fingers and toes.
Fingers and toes.
There.
Oh.
And just hope I'm not, like going to the beach, to the sea or anything.
That's why it's
Exposed to
winter.
any major
yeah.
salt water.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't like the beach that much anyway.
that's a smart
Yeah.
question.
Well, and in December, you have to go kind of pretty far
Well,
south.
but see, I was thinking like feet, like if it's summer and you're just hanging around the house in bare feet, then then between your toes, that's not that big of a thing. But if you're wearing socks all the time, then you might get sweaty.
You could get infected.
Okay, Steven, thank you for your question. Can I have my own
yeah,
question now?
okay.
I'm
Now
more
Ina has a
serious,
question.
okay?
I don't think it gets much more serious than that,
You think? Okay,
Well,
whatever
okay,
you
maybe.
think.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
agree. I agree with you always, Steven, Okay. Let's say someone told you that you could solve world hunger and disease. And all you had to do was see to it that one innocent person has to die.
Just one innocent person. But you had to see to it.
And it wasn't you.
And it can't be you.
Yeah.
You think I would?
Would
Would
you
you
do
do it?
that?
Me?
Would-
You think I would?
If you had
Oh!
if you had the power to decide. Right here, right
That's
now.
That's a bad question. I mean, look. I might give it a shot, yeah, but I don't think it would work.
Yeah, this is a very abstract question.
I mean,
Because
look,
how would that solve world hunger and disease, Ina?
even if you stop world hunger and disease, then we've got overpopulation to deal with,
Which is also
a problem.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So
We would stretch the planet, okay? Because it's a magical question.
it's a magical
It is
question,
a magical question.
and then
It's
like
not so literal.
then magically I wouldn't have to feel guilty about it.
Hey,
So
that's an option.
Yeah, then it's not really a question. is
Because
it?
if it's
Then
an
you just-
innocent person, they'd get to heaven. Right?
yeah, okay.
Don't
Yeah,
look
yeah,
at
right.
me.
And I wouldn't have
Well,
to
what do
feel
you say?
guilty about it because it's a magical thing, and I could just get rid of my guilt somehow, and I wouldn't have to go to jail or anything.
Okay, before we go too deeply into these kind of questions, we need to take a break.
Again?
Yeah, we have to take a break. And we don't have much time left. There's only 10 more minutes to find out about the internal life of Stephen Donatelli.
He's a nice guy.
More than 10 minutes, and it'll probably start to get really boring or really scary. So 10 minutes. And
That's good. Yeah, that's good. We only have 10 minutes left. Stick around. You're still listening to Homesick at Home with Ina MK.
And Steven Oxner.
Now I don't know why.
And we only have a few more minutes here. We're going to talk over one of your favorite songs just to, compact everything that we can into this very short.
We have to manage. We have to make it.
We're listening to Guns N' Roses.
actually, this is actually the only song from this album that I like.
Oh, wow. That was
We're
lucky.
Yeah.
Mary
Yeah.
is guessing.
Because this isn't really Guns N'
favorite
Roses.
question.
This is Axl's whatever.
Spirit Flying?
Yeah, well, by this was Chinese Democracy. This was the album that he did after everybody else in the band left, got kicked out, got fed up, and just quit.
Speaking of democracy.
Speaking of democracy, okay. You say, I've read your blog, and I've also read your introduction to this interview, and you've talked about how the U.S. presidential election this year is about escaping in scandal and controversy so that people can avoid talking about serious problems and their solutions. So my first question is about the presidential election and what you see as scandalous and controversial. And then my second question is, what are the serious problems of the world?
No, I
And you only have 30 seconds.
facepalm, yeah.
And you have 30 seconds. So
It's
go.
a magical question, too. I can solve them all in 30 seconds, right? Where's the person that I need to take out and kill?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, going back to your question, right?
Oh,
Can we make this into a magical question, too? No, there is so much just wrong with the election in the U.S. this year. But it's not. I don't think it's necessarily with the election itself. I think this is all symptoms of a deeper problem. I mean, kind of the confusing or merging of entertainment and serious issues. You know, we've got a reality TV star running for president.
Yeah.
And we've got news anchors from serious news stations playing themselves on television shows. And we've just got this blurring. And it's funny that I didn't read this book called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman until just a few years ago. And he wrote it in the 80s, I think, back before the internet and before TV on demand and all this, and before reality TV. But a lot of what he talks about there is really kind of coming true. You know, he was making fun of Ronald Reagan for having been an actor before he became a president. But then Reagan was also the head of the Actors Union or whatever and did some administrative stuff, and he was governor of California. Well, now we've got this guy who was a businessman and then became a reality TV star, and now he's going to try to become president. And who's running against him? Mm-hmm. A former first lady, who, I mean, she does have qualifications and she is smart, but how do we all know about her? Because she essentially was essentially a celebrity, which is kind of what the first lady is. Mm-hmm. So we've got two people that first came to public eye by being celebrities, not out of really their own sort of qualifications or character or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then there are just so many other ways too, where entertainment and celebrity and serious things like politics have just gotten smashed together. You know, you can see it on your news feed on Facebook. You know, serious things next to just plain amusing, entertaining things. Cats doing tricks next to, you know, Syria, the Syrian civil war. It's all
chaotic.
Yeah.
It's like a plov.
So how do you fix the problems? I don't know. I mean, there's the real issues. I mean,
yeah. What are the real issues?
Okay, you know, healthcare in the U.S. is an issue, and there's this thing about what's called Obamacare and the premiums rising, but that ends up becoming polarized. Either Obamacare is great or it's horrible. Well, no, it's got to be somewhere in between. There's got to be compromise. There are actual economic reasons why the premiums are going up, why the costs are going up, because you're insuring, and so there's stuff like that. But then, you know, there's debt. The U.S. federal government's debt, which is a problem that just keeps increasing, that should be talked about and dealt with, and it just keeps on getting dodged. There's immigration issues. There's terrorism, and all of these things are kind of dumbed down, watered down, made into issues that where it's either you're far right or far left. Soundbite answers, and that's not really going to get anywhere, because the solutions in a democracy really have to be about compromise and finding middle ground. And the more it's about sound bites, the less you can find middle ground, because sound bites don't talk to one another. Sound bites don't even talk to the speech or the paragraph or the dialogue that they were part of. They're taken out of context, and then they're juxtaposed to another sound bite just to create tension and conflict. How do you then compromise and find middle ground?
Yeah, how?
People have to slow down and start listening to one another again and talking to one another, and, you know, reaching out and trying to find the person where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with them, trying to see things from their perspective. And you know, it's slowing things, really a lot of it's just slowing things down, I think.
Slowing things down and compromise.
This would lead me into another question that we have for you this evening before we go. You also talked about how in Armenia it seems that life has a slower pace here, but at the same time it's more chaotic, and that there's a way that people in Armenia, as well as in Italy where you lived, people am I right by saying that they incorporate this chaos in a way into their own lives? And how has that changed your mentality being here? Or has it?
Well, it has. I mean, it's something that, a lot of things just kind of evolve, changes and whatever.
Yeah.
And I can look back and see things that I experienced or things that I read that point the way to where I am now and the way that I think now. Even though I might fool myself into thinking that I've thought this way or been this way for a long time, but I haven't. I've changed. But it's hard to see that in yourself. But there's the. Can I talk about a philosopher? I haven't yet.
Sure.
Friedrich Nietzsche has this thing where he talks about you tear away great tragedy, and he's talking about classic Greek tragedies. They tear away this veil that conceals the chaos. He assumes that the origin, everything is chaos. And that the order is something that we put over it, that we impose on it, so that we're really in charge of creating order, and nature really is chaos. Well, great tragedy tears away those categories, tears away that veil. The tragic hero doesn't have a tragic flaw, according to him. They're stuck in a position where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. That on the air, Dave?
Sure.
I don't know. This is the first time I've been on the radio. And so what it does is, by putting someone who's admirable in that position where they really can't get it right, they are, even Hamlet. Hamlet can't get it right. Oedipus can't get it right. Prometheus can't get it right because no matter what he does, something bad is going to happen. Like your question, do I kill an innocent person, or do I let disease and hunger persist? Well, it should draw us to question those categories, to question the way that we've organized the world, and maybe take it apart a little bit and reorganize it in a way that is a little bit more suitable to
have one
where we are now, not the way that people in the past have seen it, the people who created those categories. We can't get rid of them completely. There's no way of starting from scratch. There's always a tradition. Words have a meaning. We can't just change the meaning of a word like that, but we can
Is it possible,
shift them, whatever. So, I mean, there's chaos under there. And in the U.S., and even with technology, things are just organized, aren't they? You want to find a file on your computer, and you just search and you find it. You want to find a piece of paper in your house, and you might have to run all over the place, especially if you're not in the habit of putting things in their place.
Yeah.
We tend, especially with technology, we tend to forget that things are not naturally organized, that as human beings, we are the organizers. But I think in places like Italy, when I studied there for 6 months, and here, that chaos bubbles to the surface more often. And so it just seems like it is more real to me, more authentic, because you do have to kind of challenge yourself and challenge the way that you look at the world and reevaluate it more often.
There are alternatives.
Yeah. I mean, you're more constantly evolving because you realize that, the way that you see the world is not the only way. It's not. It was created, and it needs to be modified in order to not lose touch. The more it doesn't change, the more out of touch it gets with the kind of primordial chaos that's out there.
And with that, I'm so sorry, but we have to go because it's already 10:02. If you can imagine.
It was so interesting.
I know it. We just got started.
Yeah, just push the buttons and we'll continue.
You guys are interested. It's 10:02. I'm sure people are falling asleep at home.
Well, thanks for being here tonight, and thank you, Ina. Will be back. Ina will be back next Friday with her first solo ride here on Homesick at Home.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.